He's a sick fuck. That's what Biden said, and he's totally right. So people have to ask themselves, do they want a sick fuck as their president?
Alter, thank you for joining. John's going to join us tonight and next week because I want to spend a fair amount of time talking with him about his book. And there are usually two kinds of political books that are well reported or well written. It's rare to be both. John Alter only writes books that are both. John, tell people what your book is about, what it's called, and then I want to ask you about the race, and then I want to have you come back next week and talk at length about the book.
The book is called American Reckoning: Inside Trump's Trial and My Own. I was one of the only people, just about a dozen of us, who were in the courtroom of the felony trial every single day in New York. And remember, it was untelevised. So when people like me were sending dispatches, I was writing for the New York Times opinion section and then for the Washington Monthly, which credentialed me, and Old Goats, my Substack. These were like messages in a bottle. They did not begin to reflect the drama of what went on in the trial of the century so far, and so there was just a lot happening in this trial that most people didn't get unless they read the trial transcripts or something. And even then, you would not get the full flavor of what was going on. So I wanted to do that, but I also wanted to, in just a very short book that I wrote over the summer, to explain the stakes. I don't think the stakes are being well enough appreciated. And I think when General Milley and John Kelly say the man is a fascist, we should listen to that. And so what I do in the book is I provide a lot of evidence to suggest that they are correct. I actually have some of John Kelly's earlier comments in the book. And so I think it's really important that for all this outstanding horse race coverage that you're doing, Mark, on a daily basis, that we match that with what you might call stakes coverage, where we really look hard at what is on offer for the American people. And I do think our ideals are really being tested, and that this is not a drill, and that this guy is not just another candidate, not just another, Republican candidate for president. I mean, I think Liz Cheney's right that he's not a conservative in any sense of the word, but he's also not even just, he's so out of our system. When you see this thing with Musk and Putin, basically Trump wants to be an American Putin. Putin is the only person he's never said anything critical about in the entire world. And Harris is entirely right that he can be easily manipulated by Putin. So I just think that, whether the voters are caring about this or not, we need to do everything we can in the closing days to make them care. And they did care about democracy in the closing days of the 2022 race. And January 6th, exit polls showed it was a big issue in preventing a red wave. I think it can be again if that spotlight that Alex was talking about is properly focused on the right thing, which is that Donald Trump is dangerous for this country. And we just simply, no matter whether we agree with Harris or totally disagree with her on policy, as Pat Moynihan used to say, taxes go up, taxes go down. Those aren't the real issues for this country. I'm not talking about the real issues for voters and their concerns. I'm talking about what, as a historian, or I think any smart political analyst, or all of the many, many smart people you have on this call, they all understand at some level that this guy is dangerous. So the question is, what will people do about it?
Yeah. John, if Trump wins, and if he, let's say he wins sizably, which I don't think is impossible, how will you explain that to yourself?
Well, I mean, first in the book, I confess, I have always for many years liked to think of myself as an idealist without illusions. That's the way John F. Kennedy described himself. And I now realize I have more illusions about a big chunk of the American electorate than I thought I did. I mean, I had read, Sinclair Lewis, It Can Happen Here, that he wrote in the 1930s. William Shirer wrote that Americans were susceptible to dictatorship. I had always thought it, with Huey Long and Joe McCarthy, George Wallace, the demagogues never really got that close to the White House. Wallace ran 3 times and didn't make it. He was shot in 72. But, it didn't seem like something that was going to get to the presidential level. And so demagoguery works. And that's my first D in, trying to.
So what would you say if Trump won big?
The demagoguery.
No. But what would you say to Okay, but what would you say if somebody saw you on the street the day after the election and they said, Jonathan, I saw you on two-way and I heard you say the reason Trump won is because demagoguery works. I don't feel I voted for him because of demagoguery. I feel I voted for him because I wanted the border controlled and I didn't want my daughter playing against the trans.
Well, I would, because I'm honest with people, I would say, well, I wish, it's too late now, but I wish you had looked at some issues beyond the particular campaign issues this year, to the character of the man and to the sense of whether he had the decency, the moral standing that we should expect from our president, and whether you maybe didn't look hard enough about whether he's selling out our allies. I mean, we've kept the nation safe from a world war for 80 years because of the notion of collective security, which is better known now as NATO, right? Collective security works. Trump, Vance, Putin, they're on the wrong side of this. And so I would say to that person, I would say to that voter, look, I have respect for you. I'm sure you're a very decent person. I don't think you're deplorable, but you made a serious misjudgment when you went into the polling place. I'm sorry.
So the Harris campaign is suggesting that she's got 3 closing topics: abortion rights, reproductive freedom, the economy broadly defined, including Social Security and taxes and everything else, and then this issue of Trump being unfit. Would you think it would be smarter for her to simply focus on the last one, or you think all 3 are important?
No, I think she has to focus on all of these issues. I think her line from the town hall, she didn't, perform especially well. I thought Van Jones had the best approach, which is that Trump is lawless, Harris has to be flawless. So there is a double standard, but she did get off one important line, which you may have, I know you've heard about, that Axelrod highlighted, that Trump has an enemies list and I have a to-do list. And I think what that encapsulates is that Trump really is dangerous and I actually want to get stuff done. And Trump hasn't done anything on small business, for instance. His proposals are really thin when you look at them. Some of them, as Goldman Sachs and Moody's found would destroy the budget and probably tip us into a recession. If you look at 20% tariff, it's insane. I think Mark Cuban called it inflationary lunacy. But otherwise, he doesn't have much that he's offering. So it's important that she keep focused on the future. What am I going to do for you down the road? But also have this theme of not fascism, because it's been too long since they studied fascism in school, but ways of explaining why he is going to betray our allies, use his powers against the American people, and is indecent. So I keep coming back to the story of Paul Pelosi, and I don't understand why there hasn't been more attention on Paul Pelosi. Why do I mention Paul Pelosi? Because last week, Trump said that he would use the military and the National Guard against the enemy within, and he mentioned just 3 people, Adam Schiff and the Pelosi's. That really caught my attention, not just Nancy Pelosi, the Pelosi's. All right, so who is Paul Pelosi? He's an 82-year-old man who had his skull fractured by a Trump cultist who broke into his house. When he was near death in the hospital, Trump is making jokes about him. Later, the next year, he's speaking to the California Republican Party state convention. He's still making jokes about him a year later. And now he's so mad at Pelosi for, maneuvering Biden out of the race, which I have all this fresh reporting on in my book. He's so mad about that now he's still after Paul Pelosi. He wants to use the National Guard against Paul Pelosi. You could say, well, he'll never be able to do that. But just the fact that that's what he wants to do, that's the kind of individual we're talking about, as Joe Biden rightly said, the lack of decency, the cruelty, he's a sick fuck. That's what Biden said. And he's totally right. So people have to ask themselves, do they want a sick fuck as their president who wants to use the National Guard against an 82-year-old man who was almost killed, who happens to be married to Nancy Pelosi? That's what we need to focus on.
Okay. John, I'm hoping you have time for us
I'm
next
sorry
week to
to be
come
so
back.
passionate about
No, that's
this.
all right. That's right. I'm hoping you have
it's-
time next week. Good, safe on your travels, and we'll talk about when you can come back. Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about
Thank you.
my
We'll talk
Pelosi
about the
scoops.
book. Yeah, yeah.
Great,
Want to
thank
do
you.
that, John? Thank you. All right.
He's a sick fuck. That's what Biden said. And he's totally right. So people have to ask themselves, do they want a sick fuck as their president